Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today, we are thrilled to welcome two-time Academy Award-winning filmmaker Kathryn Bigelow to discuss her newest political thriller, A House of Dynamite, brought to us by Netflix. This conversation was recorded a couple of weeks ago as a live panel discussion at the New York Film Festival. This was part of our support of the Artist Academy program, where we bring conversations about the art and craft of filmmaking to the next generation of directors. We're grateful to friends at the New York Film Festival and Film at Lincoln Center for this fantastic collaboration. Joining the discussion with Kathryn about A House of Dynamite is her truly all-star team of artists who worked on this incredible film, including Emmy Award-winning production designer Jeremy Hindle, Oscar-nominated director of photography Barry Ackroyd, two-time Academy Award-winning film editor Kirk Baxter, Academy Award-winning composer Volker Bertelmann, and rounding out the panel is three-time Academy Award winner Paul N.J. Ottosson, who was the film's re-recording mixer, sound designer, and supervising sound editor. Without giving too much away, the film is an extremely tense thriller depicting how the U.S. government might respond to the threat of a rogue incoming intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, with all of the chaos and drama going on in the world right now, the idea of a nuclear attack may not be top of mind for most of us. So I started the conversation by asking Kathryn what it was about this scenario that drew her in and made her want to make this movie right now. Here's director and producer, Kathryn Bigelow.
Well, I think we are living in ever more volatile times, and it was a question I had. It was a kind of what if curiosity. What would happen if there was an ICBM directed toward the continental United States? What happens then? What is the protocol? What are the logistics? What halls of power does that, who handles that? And so I happened to be talking about this to a friend of mine, and he said, well, you should speak to this incredible journalist / screenwriter who is basically a subject matter expert, and that was Noah Oppenheim. And he's just an incredible writer. We started talking about this, and it just developed. It was extraordinary. I mean, you could see the movie immediately, but you realize that where I realized I wanted to have an audience try to kind of understand palpably what those 18 minutes contain. In other words, how short 18 minutes actually is, which is what generated the kind of prismatic approach of the piece, the 3 chapters, but 18 minutes is nothing to determine the fate of the world. So that was the genesis.
Yeah. And I'm so curious about the authenticity. The detail and the specificity in the film made it feel completely believable at all times and very, very authentic. And so did you have cooperation from the government or NGOs on the process of doing this? And that authenticity, I would love for you to touch on your work with this amazing team of artists and how you achieved that authenticity.
I think the authenticity was paramount to us, because if you're inviting the audience into Stratcom, you have to be responsible about the authenticity of it and the realism of it. In other words, that's kind of the backbone of this movie is the reality of it. Just as one of our actors says, this is insanity. No, this is reality. And the president is the sole decision maker and has sole authority to make that decision at the end of the movie, as you see. And there's only minutes in which he does that or is allowed to do that. So it's kind of nerve shattering, but that's what it's like. We had 3-star and 4-star generals who were with us the whole time, and in fact, Paul met with Dan Karbler, who's a 3-star general, like constantly, and going into all the sort of sonic details of the missile control center. And everything that the actor did was pretty much generated by consultations with our tech advisors. So it's very well researched, and Noah Oppenheim, again, coming from a background of journalism, he just had impeccable research, incredible contacts, and we in fact spoke to a person from the Pentagon, a former chief of staff, and asked, okay, what's the protocol for a president to learn how often did they rehearse for a nuclear strike? And he said, almost never, because there's no time. They're doing other things. They have hostage negotiations or whatever. And so, that was a chilling
And one of the
effect.
most terrifying things is, the president's line about, I only had one, briefing about this.
Yeah.
It's just, it's terrifying.
If they have one.
That's amazing. Jeremy, the sets, oh my God. The sets on this film are just extraordinary. You've got all those massive situation rooms at, Stratcom and 2 at the White House and Fort Greely and even FEMA. You have a big situation room there. Can you talk a little bit about your research process, your process around research and how you achieved authenticity on those sets?
It was interesting. We started really fast on this film. It was just Kathryn and Greg and I, and we started R&Ding it before we really, it wasn't greenlit or anything. And we, there's very little research in each one of these rooms. There's like 3 or 4 pictures for each of them, and they're quite classified. And what you can see, a lot of things have been removed and painted out. But we had to start building them or start designing them, because we realized we had to build most of these on set, on stages, because the way that when you read the script, and we realized really quickly that everyone's talking to screens. They're talking to each other on screens. This isn't a way, there's no way to shoot this. You can't shoot on blue screen. You can't have them, not with the way Kathryn directs, and you need 360 sets, and it needs to feel real. So we had to build them all on stage so we could kind of figure out how to shoot them all simultaneously, at least understand how they all worked and how so once we started shooting, and we had, how many cameras do we have? Maybe 40.
Always with 3 cameras.
And then how many of the surveillance ones?
And
40?
Yes, yeah, you have something.
Like, they were everywhere. And then we had all these little individual sets of each other character that's on the screen had to be on their own little set. So it was all sort of kind of shot simultaneously live, like so we could really understand it.
So I want to make sure that you guys are clocking what he's saying. So even though you might have been on the Stratcom set shooting, but you had the other stages lit up and the people were in there doing their, so you were doing it all live the whole time.
Yeah.
That's because the first time I watched the film, I'm like, are they being fed off camera lines so that they can, but you actually had all the actors live in each location.
Live and simultaneous.
Yeah, many sets had to be ready for day one. Yeah, it's incredible. And then as we started to research, we had access, we got into the Situation Room at the White House. That was in, I think, March. Then we got into StratCon. That was just before, we were already building the sets. And we got to walk in and see them for the first time. And I think I had 3 minutes in the Situation Room. I could just look around, no papers, no notes, no phone, nothing. Just memorize it and run out and then make every note and call everyone possible. And then StratCon, which is underground in Oklahoma, it's the hardest facility I don't know anyone that's ever seen it. And we had access to that, and I think we had 10 minutes in it. And the same, and then you're with generals and you're just in awe, but it's like, I'm just scanning and memorizing. It's amazing. But the fact that we got to see them and every little sticker and every little detail, because the way they work is mind-blowing. Like StratCon, we learned when we were there, they rehearse 400 times a year in that room. So there's 365 days and you don't work them all. Think how many times they rehearse these scenarios. They are amazing. So the rooms they're designed for just pure work, and they're incredibly, it's not, I wouldn't say it's the stylistically, what's interesting is how they work and the command. You see, the line is pass it up the chain. Everything's about that. And it's always about how the information keeps getting passed up and collected. It's an amazing process.
Barry, you mentioned shooting 360. Can you talk a little bit about that and sort of what was the approach? And your background is in documentary cinematography, so I'm sure that kind of informed how you wanted to approach the visual storytelling for the film.
Yes, it did. It's like you said, I'm familiar with being handheld in a situation and reacting to the space and the subject. I think that's the key to it. I think Kathryn and I filmed on location mostly, and I kind of prefer, no disrespect, but I kind of prefer being on location. But for this, we had to build all the sets, and Jeremy and his team, great team of construction and design, built everything in 360 with ceilings and floors, all reproduced. Hinges on the doors were reproduced. Everything was reproduced.
Meticulous.
It was, yeah. So we knew that we could film any part of the set at any time, and including corridors and transitions between places and things. All those were built. It was a massive job on 3 full, big stages in New Jersey. So it was. So the approach was then to say, well, it's real, and we'll film it like it's real, and maybe not so much handheld because of the nature of the story, but those of you who are into cameras, like on long lenses, zooms, sliders, and little movements and little dolly movements, but nothing that interfered with the performance and the direction and telling that story. That's.
I just want to add that Barry is just intuitive and uncanny with the camera. In other words, he knows before an actor knows what they're going to do, and he's there to cover it. It's just it's an extraordinary dance between him and the cast.
Because Barry, you operate as well, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I always operate. But we've also got some other great operators, you know, Kat Castro and Gregor. They were just really attuned. You know, the people Kathryn Castro I'd met, and she worked as a focus puller on another film, but she wanted to move up, so we moved her up, and she was great. And I know Kathryn's favorite shot in this film is not mine. No, but in a good way. It's that we position these cameras. In my mind, it's not an A, B, or C camera. It's they're all going to gather information for us, and that's the key to that way of filming. Is we gather the information with an intense concentration. Every frame is potentially in the film. Every frame.
And then, Kathryn, does that style of shooting cause some adjustment time for your actors, because you're not necessarily, you know, they're not locked down to the floor on a mark, right? They can kind of.
There are no marks. It was a style that Barry really, I think, taught me on Hurt Locker, and I just love documentary filmmaking. I love how it looks, and I love the realism of it. And so in Hurt Locker, when we had these giant, you know, basically sets that are 300 meters long, if you're clearing a road from IEDs, and so we had many cameras going simultaneously, and the cast at first was like, well, which one is the close-up or which one is this? I said, all you have to do is do your job. And that unlocked something for them as well as me. And Barry, it was just so fluid. And no marks, no, we didn't use marks.
But you know, your first AC is well, the whole crew, the whole team is so important to it. And I've got to say, on this film, we had just wonderful time because I think everybody was fully behind everything we did on set, all departments, and it was a real joy in that sense. Obviously, the film is not. It, you know, has a deep story, but that doesn't mean you don't have to enjoy it, the work that goes into it. And I really felt that. I really felt it was good.
It was a very tight crew. It was amazing.
Very tight, yeah.
So, Kirk, I hear that, and I think you must have had a lot of footage coming into your edit room. And I look at this film, and I think this film must have really lived or died in the editing room. Sure. Because of the structure. There's so much information coming at you, and obviously it's a very conscious decision to kind of have this Rashomon structure and to repeat. But every time, I think one of the things I love about this film and the structuring and the storytelling is, like, yes, you're seeing the same events repeated, but every time you see the same thing come up, there's additional nuance, additional color, more. So I'm just kind of curious for you, from an editorial perspective, you know, living with that structure, was that freeing, or was it constraining? Or were you able to move things around the way you normally would?
It was exciting. Yes, you could move things around, and that had a lot to do with the approach to how Kathryn filmed it. And that I think the answer to that comes from everything that everybody's saying, is that it's so well researched, and the actors are placed in this realism where they get to react, and the cameras are on the outside coming in, and they don't know which one's quite. So it's covered in a very sort of flowing way. And if the script's written for us to leave this scene and go somewhere else at a specific point of dialogue. We could choose to stay in that room and just hear that dialogue. And so it's quite liberating in terms of when you go somewhere. You don't have to be strict to preconceived ideas, because you're still delivering the same point, but you can respond to the material you have. And that becomes, about certain performances that you just have to stay in and frame. That really become the point of why the excitement and the joy of doing it all is the kind of, all right, I'm on this side of the screen with someone looking that way, and then we're going to go to a different location completely, and they're going to be over here looking this way, and I'm going to join those together, and I can move it so quick because all this, I nerd out on all of that stuff and love it. But it's really because it's about making choices of going, but we have to land here and give this its due. So things slow down to do the gut punch. All the kind of, I think the realism that Kathryn and everyone she works with brings to things, for it to still remain real, you got to kind of get out of the way a little bit, and let sort of shots exist and move within their own. It's like Barry kind of in a lot of ways creates a lot of the edit points by how he's on someone and then moves over here. So I try to let all those things exist and stay, and not manhandle it too much.
And then I'm kind of curious about the process, because of what you're talking about. There's so many different ways that the film could have been cut, and how many, how you could have structured it and put it together. Did you? I mean,
There's only one way.
The right way, which is the way the film is now. I know test screenings, are most filmmakers have a love-hate relationship with them, mostly hate. But what's your process of, as you're cutting, do you show it to friends? Do you do friends and family screenings, or how do you?
We did a bunch of generals.
Yeah, 3 and 4 star generals. Yeah, we just
you screened it for 3 and 4 star generals. That's wild.
Get a sense of the authenticity, and to a person, they were like, it's like, I've been in that room, I live in that room, and there was a tremendous amount of kind of excitement about sharing, in a way, their life with the rest of the world. And so it was, I don't know, it was kind of exciting and
also nerve-wracking. I remember saying to Greg Shapiro, the producer on the film, as we were walking to the screening to show all the generals, because Kathryn you were pleased with the film. We were all pleased with the film. We hadn't really shared it yet. We hadn't shown Netflix yet. And I said to Greg, if anything's going to change this movie, it's going to be this screening right here. Because if the generals shit on something and saying it's not real, Kathryn will change it. And because it was the pursuit of being honest.
Yeah, and
they didn't shit on it.
No.
As well, they shouldn't. Kathryn, one of the things I've noticed about your films over the years is that you tend not to really use traditional scoring that much. You have had a very long relationship with Paul, who's sitting next to you. You guys have done many, many films together. Paul's a sound designer. And I feel like you tend to lean on Paul's sound design almost as score sometimes. So Volker is a new member of your creative team. This is the first time you guys have worked together. I would say the music is very powerful and very forward in this film, but I feel like the score and the sound design are very much in dialogue on the film. So can you talk about your decision to bring Volker in and using these two elements together so powerfully?
Well, it was really an embarrassment of riches. I mean, what Paul does is he three-dimensionalizes any space, and it's just extraordinary. You think you know what the space is, and then he'll bring a sound in, and suddenly it's amplified tenfold. And so I was listening to, and then there was a point where there was, in the quiet spaces, I thought, well, it might be interesting to bring some score in here. And then I sort of stumbled on the incredible soundtrack to All Quiet on the Western Front, and my head exploded. And so I reached out to Volker, and gratefully he had a short opening in his schedule. He came over, he looked at the movie, even in its sort of raw stage, and I just think the synergy between Paul and Volcker and the sound design and the music, there's so much that they have in common. And it's also so much that they are in conversation with one another. And I don't know, it was just a fluid, seamless, synergistic process.
Yes, it was.
I mean, those strings are like the cry of humanity. And then the F-16s out of nowhere, not that you have to see them, but they're there. I don't know, it's just the sound, I think, is phenomenal.
Yeah, we were also talking a lot about the very first sound, let's say the very first sounds when the film is black, and we hear this moaning sound. And I was experimenting with a lot of woodwind instruments where the instrumentalists were singing while they were playing notes. And because of the bending of the note, you have to somehow get this kind of, voice sound in it, or a kind of animalistic sound. So when we recorded at Air Studios, we did a couple of experiments with low contrabass flutes and bass saxophones, and so all sorts of different sounds, just to find variations, because through the whole film, this sound is, for example, happening every now and then whenever we feel the earth is getting lost under your feet, then this sound is coming. At the same time, it's a thriller, moving forward, 3-chapter thriller that has to build dynamic up and up and up until we see the president by himself, where you just feel like this is maybe the moment where the humanity is a big part of it, because everybody in the film struggles in a way with the perspective of either deciding that lives are lost or being a part of, getting lost very soon. And I think that needed for me kind of religious, I always come back to a kind of religious theme in places like that. And that's for me a lot of times strings or, ethereal sounds that help, to emphasize the emotion. And then there's obviously some ticking that creates tension and time. And these elements, I think, we introduced in the first scene.
I appreciate you saying, elements to introduce tension. The first time I watched the film, my Apple Watch went off and said, your heart rate is getting above 120.
Seriously?
It wanted to know if I was okay. So this movie this movie really just did a number on me physically, yes, as well as emotionally. But, Paul, for you as well, I would love for you to talk a little bit about using the track to maintain that tension and how you do it, because, well, I'll ask a follow-up to that, but,
It's a pretty deep process with Kathryn's movie, because we really bound ourselves to what is real, and we work with that parameter. That's our palette of sounds we need to live in. And to the beginning where we start, they have all the monitors that everybody on live. That also means all the dialogue is also live. So it's an immense, I don't know how many filmmakers are working here, but usually you have a handful, maybe 10 here, 20, 25 microphones of different pieces of dialogue from everywhere. And usually in a movie, you strive to have this clarity in everything, but there was a beauty in things not being perfect. And they're in a position where there's a lot at stake. And I felt it was great to not all have their clarities. We used some of the microphones that were, a guy sitting in a closet over there on another set 200 feet away that, we heard enough of them, but I think added to the tension in the movie. And then, of course, there's a lot of layers, again, to maintain this visceral kind of tension, because at the end of the day, there's something coming in we don't see, and there's a blip on the screen that is that's going to end us all here. But we build up this tension to add in the scenes to also be able to take that away, and then that the human motion factor comes in. So a lot of movies, things get more intense as we go sonically. And I think it's almost a reverse approach to me in this movie, because when Edith comes on, it becomes a very personal movie at that point. And I think seeing this movie is outside of what I do, but it's incredible. We have this one man making this decision at the end of the day that is very human, emotional based, I think, choice he has to make. But everything preceding it is a procedure where they've trained 400 times a year to make this perfect. And of course, when they realize in a movie that this is real, I think their emotions also come in. So I work with a lot of the sounds to add this tension that they might be feeling. There's a lot of information coming in. It's not just one person speaking. It is 20 people calling in. What the hell is going on? What are you doing? And there's a lot of responses. So they were reflected also in the group. So we usually shoot group, the people you see talking in the background of the movies. And most of the time it's kind of non-specific. We want to interfere with the story. So we did shoot a pass of these non-specific things. But it kind of didn't really work. So our writer, Noah, actually wrote scripts for us for the group to speak in the background. You might not hear it all the time, but it became essential to hear that stress in the voices versus just saying, FEMA, picking up the phone. It was full-on scripted. So we shot like 3 days of group on this movie with, I think, 20 people each time. So immense amount of this underlying sound work went into to find the peaks and the valleys. And I don't know if that answers the question or more,
Absolutely.
maybe bargain for.
No. That's perfect. And you also teed up. I wanted to ask you about dynamic range, because obviously there's some really big sonic moments. You've got the missiles firing. You've got the reenactment of the Battle of Gettysburg, which kind of rocked me in my seat when those cannons are going off. But I especially love. To me, some of the most emotionally affecting moments in the film are the quiet moments, where people are able to break out of this procedure that they're in and kind of reflect on things. I just watching the film again. There was an extraordinary moment that caught for me in Fort Greely in that sequence when after the intercept missiles fail, they kind of all just scatter. They just leave the room. There's nothing more for them to do at that point, and it's just this moment of beautiful, it just says so much about them and their mental state. And, finding the figure in the coat pocket and then putting it on all these. So I would love for you to talk about the way you used the dynamic range in the film to kind of take us on the emotional journey.
Yeah, like I think I said before, it's a very different movie sonically for me, because a lot of action movies I worked on, and the action on the screen is kind of what leads us and tells us what we need to do. But in this movie, it was basically everything we do not see that influenced you. But there still might be more sound in this movie than like when I worked on, some 2012 End of the World movie. There might be more sounds in this movie than that movie. And to some degree, it's more challenging also, because when you get to that find those silent moments, if it's not right, it kind of ruins the scene. So you find this balance, and that's quite a bit challenging. You have a long scene where he's going through his emotion, deciding to call his mom. Mm-hmm. And we come from really busy sonic scenes, then to music taking over, and we need to do this beautiful handover of everything. And it's easy to break those scenes. But of course, you have the actor doing amazing performance on the screens. Be very supportive of that and not withdraw any of that attention from him. And finding the path how to get there. It's a fun, challenging way, I think, in his movies. And I really appreciate working on Kathryn's movie, because we spend so much time of being realistic, but we have immense amount of sound in it that are just different from most movies that I would work on.
Let's open up and take some questions from the audience, shall we? Is anybody? I see a hand way back in the back. Yes, you. The question was about the production logistics and how Kathryn kind of navigated, working with the cast and crew on being in that moment for those 19 minutes on.
I mean, I think the material really generated a tremendous amount of compassion and support for the story and the information to get out there. That, we live in a really volatile world, progressively more volatile. There's 9 nuclear countries, only 3 are members of NATO, and that calculus alone is somewhat daunting. And I wanted it to be in real time, so we would shoot in as much as we could in chronological order. I think that's really key for something like this. And so that being said, and then having the tech advisors on the set to talk through with the actor questions they may have, like how, what is the likelihood of a ground-based interceptor taking out the ICBM? And of course, we come to realize it's fairly unlikely. So I think it's just a constellation of both the integrity of the story, the meticulousness of the script, the commitment of the cast and crew to tell this story, and my good fortune to be working with all of these people.
And a lot of the cast didn't meet each other. Everyone's in that isolation of their bit only, which kind of speaks to exactly what occurs. Someone is only privy to that little piece that they're involved in, and they pass it along. And that's the movie sort of shows that gathering of information getting more and more complex for that last person. So as the movie shrinks to something smaller, the information is getting bigger and harder and faster.
Other questions? Yeah, right here in the middle, Ms. Hirschberg. So the question was about Volker's score, and did you work to picture, or did you compose more of like a suite, and how did you collaborate with Kirk on that?
Well, I mostly don't like suites, because suites somehow are already finished in a way, and they create obviously a pool of different motives, but in a way that's what, if I would have, let's say, an armada of assistants, I would just move that to them and then they do something with it. But I don't like that. I'm rather, well, first of all, the film was in a very good shape when I saw it the first time, and obviously there was also spots of music where you could figure out, okay, this could be a space where the music could sit. And with a film like that, it's, I think a lot of times we talked about ramps in a way, like where we start with the music. When does it make sense that the music can slowly get into the film, and where it stops and where is silence? I think one very good example is maybe the chapter ends, where we just felt like we ramp it up, but we let it just be empty, at least at the first one. And then we obviously also talked about, can we do variations in the endings? And for me, the more I've done now films that have a lot of tension, I think the silence is one of the most effective element in the music. So you really have to make sure that you're not suddenly getting into an emotional state of mind where you just want to have strings on extreme emotional scenes. You just want to make sure where you place them, and very, very carefully. And I think that was, Kirk's and Kathryn's work was so already precisely laid out that for the music, if I would have had a suite, I might have had it ripped it apart and start from scratch with all the motives. There's maybe one thing that I said before, the very first piece when we start, until when the strings are coming in and we see the missile flying in the sky. I think that whole piece was in a way defining what the elements could be for the whole film.
And the score doesn't just repeat as you go through the three scenarios, it actually evolves quite a bit.
Yeah, it does. It's actually, we talked about it, that it needs more intention, more tension, not intention, tension, and that it actually, the more information you gather, obviously it's also helpful to have people stay in the film, because otherwise if it loses like energy, you might say like at some point, where is the tension? So I think music is one part of that to actually raise the tension in the film.
Because Kathryn works in a linear way, which means when she usually beginning to end, so when you turn over things, you can start working on things pretty early on, and allows you to experiment and try a lot of things. A lot of movies we work on, they will turn over the movie and it changes in 1,000 different ways before we're done. And I know probably for a composer it's very hard. You find a tempo and a pace that changes all the time. Mm-hmm. But I know with Kathryn, she finds the rhythm, and together, with Kirk. And you have a movie like on my, and when I started working on it, I started working on the sound design of it. I might start mixing day 2 or 3, and then I mix the movie over the next 7 months. So when I get to the pre-dub stage, it's kind of close to being done. And assume when you're being composed, it's very helpful to you as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, there's one scene, for example, where there's a cut with a Canon shoot, for example. That is, I mean, that's very impactful in the cinema. I can't beat that with a drum. You know, that was already so present. And if you write and you consider that this sound will always be there, that is for me very important information, because I can stop the composition right before that, because I know the sound is taken over. If that is changing nearly in the mix, I mean, I've worked on films where the cut is still changing while we are mixing. And then you in a way just, you know, you move things somewhere.
You're just chasing the cut.
Yeah, you try to fix it, but the let's say the dynamic curve is not exactly right, and I think that's very helpful for both of us.
Yeah, and I think Laura is a great mixer on her own, so I'm sure that she has been in those chairs where there's 100 changes coming in on any given reel, and like, what the hell? You know, we finished this.
Kathryn, you would never do that. You would never keep changing the picture while
Oh
you're...
my goodness.
Well, actually, I want to share something, maybe an arbitrary note to that, but it's the fourth movie we're doing, and I have still not worked overtime on any of her movies, but just to have it, because, yeah.
Make a decision and stick to it. Amazing. Another question? Yes, here in the back. So the question is if there were any kind of references, Barry, this is for you and Kathryn, about how you wanted to approach the visual style for the film.
I can promise you it wasn't The Office. In fact, it's vice versa. I think I've been doing this. I'm glad you said youthful, because I can't claim to be youthful, but I've been doing it in a youthful way throughout my career, from documentaries in the 80s, 90s, and I realized that I evolved a style, which is, it has motion, it has energy, uses zooms, which are not common in most filmmaking, I suppose. But it's also, for me, it's the most intense way of looking at something. And I mean, we have a room full of people, and we have in our minds, we have a wide shot. But as soon as you spoke, it's a close-up. And the camera could do that in a split second. I would have found you. The sound, as we've talked about, you listen and you sense something, a flick of an eye that means that I have to go. And you're so attuned to that you move like that. There are versions of the style that I think I've kind of tried to evolve, and there's some very great versions of it, and there are other copies which are not as good. That's just natural. And I'd like to think that it's a style that
It's youthful.
Yes, it's youthful. And also, Kathryn said on Hurt Locker that I was teaching her. I was learning from Kathryn all the time. Do more of that. We want more like this. We've only got 3 cameras. Let's get more cameras. Get another camera. When we got 4 cameras, then we should get 5 cameras. We need to, it's but use them all simultaneously. It's something that's it's not easy, but it's natural to me.
When Jeremy and I visited the White House Situation Room, I mean, those people are young. Yes, there's a Captain Walker type woman there who is well seasoned, probably had been there maybe 10, 15 years, but the rest of the people there, the data collators, they're young. And you kind of walk in, it's like, all right, these are the people like taking care of us, and they're highly, highly competent, and yet they're, probably in their 20s, maybe early 30s. And they're saving our lives every single day. So
they're really young.
And they're really young.
They're all like 26, 27. Yeah. And you ask them how long they survive at that job, and it's 2 years max.
Yeah,
it's exhausting, because it's like they're full on intense, and what they're looking at is not nice.
Yeah.
They're not dealing with the niceties of the world at all. Like, it's really, we walked in there, it was like, whoa. And they shut all the monitors off for our 3 minutes, but you could feel the tension. Like, what they were dealing with is not what any of us understand.
Yeah.
At all.
Every single day, anyway.
Well, we are at the end of our time, as you can imagine. This is a very busy team with lots to do. But Kathryn, I just wanted to end with you and just actually salute you, because I'm just so awestruck by this film, which raises these questions, but then doesn't give us any easy answers. We don't know where the missile came from. We don't know if it did Chicago get obliterated. We don't know what the response from the president was. And I'm in awe of you having the courage of your convictions to raise those questions and then leave it ambiguous.
Well, I think that's it's really an invitation to the audience to then think about this. I mean, is this the world that we want to live in? Maybe there's something we can do about it. Obviously, my hope is I'd like to reduce the nuclear stockpile. I think it's far too fragile and volatile, and an environment that we're in. But I kind of give this then over to the audience. If it would be too easy if we could point our finger at somebody, oh, they did that, and oh, that happened, and they're all still alive, it's all okay. It's kind of not, it's not easy. The answer to the movie is a question, and it's, in a way, all of yours to answer.
Many thanks to Kathryn, Jeremy, Barry, Kirk, Volker, and Paul for joining us today. And thank you to our good friends at Netflix for helping us put this amazing panel discussion together. And an extra special thanks to our friends at the New York Film Festival and Film at Lincoln Center for their collaboration on the Artist Academy program. Be sure to check out A House of Dynamite. It's now streaming on Netflix in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. We have links, as always, in our show notes. Just make sure you take your heart medicine before you watch the movie. If you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.